Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, a quiet place in the cosmos where your thoughts can unwind, and knowledge becomes a soft lullaby for the night. Tonight's journey takes us somewhere both familiar and impossible, into the hidden landscapes of time travel. But not the kind with flashing lights or spinning wormholes. This one doesn't need a machine or even a map. It happens right inside your own mind, quietly every time you remember. Before you settle in, take a moment to breathe. Maybe dim the lights, and if you enjoy these slow wanderings through science and thought, you're welcome to subscribe or share where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always lovely to see where our constellation of dreamers is scattered across the world. Now, make yourself comfortable, let the day fall away, and let's begin a journey through a different kind of time travel. One made not of motion, but of memory. Imagine a single second, stretched out like a silk thread. You watch the clock, its hand clicking forward, each tick so certain, so final. But when you close your eyes, that same second can stretch, warp, or vanish altogether. In the silence of your own mind, time behaves like fog. It gathers and disperses without rules. The great illusion is that time moves in a straight line. We picture it as an arrow flying from past to future, with us carried helplessly along its path. But what if the arrow isn't moving at all? What if it's us who bend and turn within it? Humanity has always been obsessed with escaping this arrow. We've built stories around it. From the ancient myths of gods reversing fate, to modern tales of travellers stepping into glowing portals. And yet, every one of those stories begins with a deeper yearning, the wish not just to change the past, but to touch it again, to relive a single moment that slipped through our fingers. It's a longing so universal that even the most rational scientists can't quite escape it. When physicists describe time, they often remind us that it isn't what our senses suggest. Einstein showed us that time stretches and folds depending on speed and gravity. Near a massive star, a single second can linger longer than on Earth. But when you think about it, your mind already performs a similar trick. Without leaving your chair, close your eyes and recall a day from your childhood. For a heartbeat, you were there. The smell, the light, the sound of a voice long gone, all of it alive again. Your brain doesn't obey the laws of the clock. It slips between moments with ease, rearranging them into a kind of private universe. In that sense, you've already built your own time machine. It's made of neurons, not steel. We measure life with numbers, seconds, years, centuries. But our experience of time depends on emotion, attention, and memory. A summer as a child feels infinite. A decade in adulthood can vanish in a blink. Waiting for an answer makes minutes expand like hours. Falling in love can make a night feel like an instant. These contradictions tell us something simple but profound. Time isn't something we pass through. It's something we create, moment by moment, inside the quiet theatre of our awareness. If we could look inside the brain while it keeps time, we wouldn't find a single clock ticking. Instead, we'd see waves of electrical rhythm, rippling through networks that light up when you remember, when you imagine, or when you dream. Scientists have found tiny clusters of neurons, they call them time cells, that fire in sequence, as though counting invisible beats. But they don't count seconds, they count experience. They mark change, the shift from one feeling to another, from one thought to the next. They remind us that time is not external. It is the mind recording its own rhythm. Maybe that's why time can feel so strange. When something surprises you, a sound, a flash, a shock, your sense of duration expands. The brain suddenly takes more snapshots per moment, and each frame feels longer. But when life repeats itself, the mind stops taking new pictures. The days blur and years slip by unnoticed. what we call passing time, is really the balance between what we remember and what we forget. So if time isn't a river, maybe it's a mirror, one that shows us how our own awareness moves. You can't step into the same memory twice because you're never the same observer. Each visit paints a new colour over the old. When you remember, you aren't looking backward. You're rebuilding. You're performing a small, quiet act of creation, reassembling fragments of feeling, image and story into something that makes sense to the person you are now. That act of remembering, of reshaping, is itself a kind of journey. Perhaps that's what time travel really is. Not defying physics, but reweaving the threads of experience. Every time you recall a moment, you change it a little. Every time you forgive, you alter the past inside you. Every dream, every relived conversation, every what-if imagined at 2 a.m. is a journey through time's most intimate corridors, the ones inside the mind. Tonight, we'll explore that secret kind of travel, how memory bends the arrow of time, how consciousness pilots through it, and how our future selves are quietly written in the way we remember our past. But for now, let your thoughts slow. Feel the seconds stretch, not as steps forward, but as ripples in still water. Time, after all, was never something we moved through. It was something that moved through us. We trust the ticking of the clock more than we trust our own sense of time. There's comfort in those neat divisions. 60 seconds, 60 minutes, 24 hours, the illusion of control. Long before mechanical clocks existed, people marked time with shadows, tides, and the steady beat of their hearts. The clock was born not to measure time, but to tame it, to give a restless species a pattern it could hold on to. But deep inside, we've always known the hours don't flow evenly. When you wait for something, time thickens. When you're absorbed in joy, it vanishes. A single afternoon of boredom can feel longer than a year of love. The hands on the wall keep turning, but the hours they count belong to no one. That's because what we call time is a translation, a way the brain organizes change. The world moves, light shifts, we age, and the mind, trying to make sense of it all, draws an invisible line and calls it time. But the universe doesn't draw that line. In physics, all moments exist at once, a vast frozen landscape of events. The ticking clock is just our way of walking through it, one step at a time. We made time linear because our memories are. We remember yesterday but not tomorrow, so we assume the arrow points forward. Yet Einstein's equations tell a different story. The laws of nature don't care which way the arrow flies. The past and future are symmetric, like two reflections in the same still pond. Still, the human mind isn't built for eternity. We need beginnings and endings. We crave sequence. Without it, we'd lose the thread of who we are. That's why we invented calendars, birthdays, anniversaries, anchors that keep us from floating away in the vastness of change. Time, in that sense, is our most beautiful fiction, a story we tell to stay coherent. Think of the moment you wake before dawn. The air is cool, the light's still grey. For a breathless instant, you can't tell whether time has stopped or just hasn't started again. Then the birds stir, the light shifts, and suddenly the story resumes. We live in those transitions, the gentle fade between stillness and motion. Each dawn is proof that time isn't marching forward. It's unfurling in loops, like petals opening one layer after another. Our ancestors saw time in circles, in moons, seasons, harvests. The idea of a straight line came later, with the rise of machines and industry. We began to think of time as something that could be owned, lost, wasted, or spent. But the heart never learned that language. It still beats in cycles, not minutes. The body keeps time in its own quiet way, through hunger, sleep, heartbeat, and breath. The brain synchronizes to these rhythms, building an inner map of moments. When one rhythm falters, from stress, fatigue, or grief, the map distorts. Hours stretch, nights collapse, and time begins to feel not like a measurement, but like a mood. We carry multiple clocks inside us, biological, emotional, psychological, each keeping its own tempo. The outer clock may insist it's midnight, but inside, memories may still be replaying yesterday afternoon. That dissonance is what gives time its texture. It's why two people in the same room can feel entirely different hours passing. For one, it's endless. For another, it's gone too soon. The next time you glance at the clock, notice how its certainty contrasts with your experience. The clock doesn't slow when you're anxious, or speed up when you're in love. It doesn't mourn or remember, it only divides. The rest, the depth, the stretch, the warmth of time that belongs to you. It's the mind's quiet rebellion against precision, a refusal to let the universe be measured down to the second. And perhaps that's the first step in understanding time travel. Before we can imagine moving through time, we have to question whether time moves at all. What if the ticking you hear isn't the universe marking progress, but your own awareness counting change? What if clocks were never meant to measure the world, but to comfort us, to assure us that something, somewhere, is steady, even when everything else is not? When you close your eyes, the world outside keeps ticking. The clocks on the walls, the orbits of planets, the pulsing of stars. But inside your mind, time does something different. It stretches and folds, it pauses and accelerates, like a film that changes speed according to the story being told. The brain has its own tempo, and it rarely agrees with the one printed on a clock face. Every thought, every heartbeat, every breath is part of a vast network of rhythms. Some are fast, electric sparks leaping between neurons. Others are slow, cycles of hormones, waves of sleep and wakefulness, hunger and calm. Together they form a hidden symphony, a biological orchestra that keeps your inner sense of now alive. Neuroscientists once searched for a single master clock in the brain, a kind of conductor keeping the instruments in sync, but they never found one. Instead, they discovered many smaller patterns, each responsible for its own rhythm. One of the most fascinating discoveries was a group of neurons in the hippocampus, the region where memories are stitched together. These cells light up one after another, like the gentle blinking of lanterns along a path. Scientists began to call them time cells. They realized these neurons don't count minutes or hours, they mark change. They fire when something shifts, a sound, a sight, a movement. And by doing so, they give the mind a sense of sequence, a way to say, this happened before that. If you imagine your experiences as beads on a string, these time cells are the thread connecting them. Without that thread, the beads scatter. Moments exist, but they don't belong to one another. The feeling of time passing, then, is less about seconds and more about the stitching of memory. But there's something even more subtle. The brain doesn't only remember what has happened, it also predicts what should happen next. In every fraction of a moment, it's guessing, checking, adjusting. That's why, when you listen to music, you can anticipate the next note even before it arrives. This process, called prediction, is the brain's way of keeping time. It doesn't measure it, it expects it. When the expected rhythm matches reality, time feels smooth. When something unexpected happens, a door slams, lightning flashes, time suddenly expands. The brain takes more snapshots of the moment, recording more detail to understand what just broke the pattern. You can think of this as a kind of mental elasticity. The brain doesn't see time, it builds it. It weaves each instant from memory and anticipation, blending what was with what could be. That's why we say time flies. When you're absorbed in something familiar, your brain predicts every moment with ease so it skips ahead effortlessly. But when life surprises you, your sense of time becomes dense. The world slows down, not because the seconds change, but because your awareness does. Even in silence, the brain is busy mapping the invisible rhythm of the world. Inside the cerebellum, the part of the brain behind your head that once was thought to control only balance. There are circuits that measure brief intervals, the spaces between sounds, the beats of a heartbeat. In the basal ganglia, deep inside the brain's core, other networks measure longer stretches, the span of a conversation, a waiting line, a drive home. Together, these systems create a mosaic of timing. None of them track real time. They track felt time, the emotional texture of each moment. Imagine walking through a forest at dusk. Your footsteps crunch softly on the leaves. The air is still, the light dim. You pause and breathe. The silence between the sounds seems to last forever. Then a sudden bird call slices through the quiet, and your sense of time snaps back. A ripple in still water. That contrast between stillness and surprise, between prediction and change, is what the brain calls the passage of time. It's a perception, not a law. Physicists often describe time as part of a four-dimensional fabric, space and time woven together, bending under the pull of gravity. But inside the mind, it behaves more like a field of memories, shifting depending on where attention shines. You don't feel seconds passing in deep thought, because attention turns inward. The outer world fades. When you return, it feels as though you've jumped forward, skipping minutes without ever noticing their departure. The brain, in its quiet practicality, simply filled in the blank with continuity. This inner universe of time is remarkably fragile. Sleep deprivation, anxiety, or trauma can distort it. Hours can feel like days or vanish in an instant. People lost in isolation, astronauts, divers, prisoners, monks, often describe time losing its shape entirely. Without external cues, the brain's private clock begins to drift. It needs rhythm, pattern, and light to stay synchronized. That's why days have such power over our minds. Sunrise and sunset are reminders that time still breathes, even when we forget to count it. But here's the quiet miracle. Despite all this uncertainty, the brain keeps us moving forward. It's as though every neuron carries a faint awareness of the story's direction, a shared memory of what forward feels like. You could call it the rhythm of becoming. We're not clocks ticking, we're songs unfolding. Each verse remembers the one before and hints at the one to come. When you think about time that way, it becomes less of a dimension and more of a sensation, a hum that exists only when we listen. The universe outside may not care about seconds, but inside, we do. Because within our thoughts, each moment isn't just counted, it's felt. So maybe time isn't something we move through at all. Maybe it's something the brain builds, one feeling at a time, so that we can walk through our own lives without getting lost in the vast stillness that surrounds everything. And if that's true, then time travel, the kind we dream about, may not be a journey through physics. It might simply be an act of attention, the art of turning the mind toward another rhythm, another version of now, and stepping softly into it. The way you might return to a melody you loved long ago, not to change it, but to hear it differently. There's a small trick the mind plays. It makes the future feel near, almost within reach, while keeping the past tucked safely behind fog. You can plan, predict, and imagine, but you never quite arrive at the time you're thinking about. By the moment you get there, it's already become now, and the future slips one step ahead again. It's like chasing a horizon that always moves at your pace. Still, we keep reaching toward it, guided by an invisible thread, a quiet expectation that something is coming next. That expectation is not just a feeling, it's a rhythm built into the brain. Scientists once believed that perception was like a camera, taking snapshots of reality as it unfolds. But modern research shows the mind doesn't simply record, it forecasts. Every second, it's predicting what the next one will hold. The world you see, hear, and touch is filtered through these predictions. When reality matches the forecast, everything feels smooth. When it doesn't, time itself seems to tremble. You felt this in your own life. Waiting for a phone to ring makes seconds drag. A sudden noise stretches a heartbeat into forever. A familiar routine can erase hours. This is the brain's rhythm of expectation. It decides how fast time should move based on what it anticipates. When something surprises you, the prediction fails, and the mind slows everything down, taking extra frames of the world to understand what just happened. That's why an accident, a fall, or a moment of awe seems to unfold in slow motion. It's not that the event itself lasts longer, but that your awareness expands to fill every fraction of it. In the quiet spaces of everyday life, the opposite happens. Predictable moments, brushing your teeth, walking the same route, eating the same breakfast, become compressed. The brain, already familiar with these scenes, stops recording as closely. The result is an illusion. Time accelerates when nothing new happens. That's why childhood seems endless and adulthood feels short. When you're young, the world is full of firsts. Every smell, sound, and colour demands attention. Each day becomes its own story. As you grow older, your brain learns the patterns. It stops writing new pages, preferring to skim the chapters it already knows. And so the years begin to blur. This soft distortion, where newness slows time and familiarity speeds it, explains why some moments feel so precious. A trip to a new city, a falling star, a confession you'll never forget. Those moments mark time differently. They create small ripples in the steady current of your inner clock. Each ripple becomes a landmark in memory, and together they form the shape of your personal timeline. Without them, the stream of days would appear seamless, and perhaps a little empty. There's also a curious effect called temporal binding, a gentle illusion in which events that happen close together in time feel connected. The brain stitches them into one seamless moment, even if they weren't truly simultaneous. It's how music feels like flow rather than fragments. The rhythm between notes disappears, only the melody remains. In life, this binding helps you navigate the world as a continuous story. But it also means you're constantly smoothing over the gaps between moments, rearranging time to fit your narrative. When something breaks that continuity, a sudden shock, a burst of emotion, you become aware of the gaps again. That's why time seems to slow in danger or awe. The mind widens its lens, refusing to skip a single frame. In that expanded awareness, a second can feel infinite. The brain is not deceiving you. It's protecting you, ensuring that nothing important is missed. Time perception, then, is a kind of survival sense, a flexible measure that adjusts to what matters most. Now, imagine you're standing in a quiet museum. In front of you is an ancient clock, its gears visible behind glass. Each tick feels deliberate, precise, eternal. But inside your mind, there's another clock, one that runs not on metal springs but on attention. Its seconds stretch or shrink according to how deeply you're engaged. When you're fascinated, the hands spin effortlessly. When you're anxious or lost, they crawl. The museum clock measures motion. Your inner one measures meaning. This duality, the outer objective world of seconds and the inner subjective world of experience, is at the heart of why the future feels so strange. We think of time as a road, and ourselves as travellers moving forward. But really, the road may be still, and we are the ones shifting perspectives, like turning the pages of a book. The future is not a place ahead of us. It's a version of the present waiting to be imagined. Each decision we make changes the way that future will appear once we reach it. In that sense, our expectations don't just anticipate time, they shape it. Think about how often you live in tomorrow. Planning, worrying, hoping, all are ways of mentally stepping ahead. The mind rehearses possible outcomes, not just to prepare, but to feel safe. That rehearsal is a form of prediction, and it bends time inward. You're already walking through the echo of an event that hasn't yet happened. The brain doesn't fully distinguish between imagining and experiencing. The same regions light up when you recall a memory or envision a possibility. To the mind, both are real in their own quiet way. So every time you picture a future meeting, a dream, or a fear, a small part of you travels there and brings back the emotional weight of it. There's a tenderness in this mechanism. It means the future isn't something distant and unreachable. It's always brushing against the edges of your awareness. Every plan, every anticipation, every whispered "what if" is the brain softly touching the shape of what could be. That's why hope feels luminous and anxiety heavy. Both are emotions that belong to futures that don't yet exist, yet they affect you as if they do. From this perspective, the boundary between past, present, and future becomes more porous. The past colours the present through memory. The future tints it through expectation. What we call now is a delicate blend of both, a shimmer of recollection and anticipation. If time were a painting, the present would be where those two colours meet. So when the future feels close, when you sense it pressing gently against the skin of the moment, it's not because time is moving faster, it's because your mind is already halfway there. It's stretching forward, building bridges of possibility, shaping a reality that will soon unfold. The clocks will keep ticking, indifferent as ever. But the real measure of time lives in this quiet act of becoming, in the way the mind moves toward what it hopes for, what it fears, and what it chooses to remember next. Try to remember the first house you ever lived in. Maybe you can picture the walls, the colour of the floor, the smell of something cooking in the kitchen. If you hold that picture for a few seconds, it starts to shimmer. Details shift. The window moves, the light softens, the sound of a voice grows louder or fades. The longer you look, the more the image seems to breathe. What you're seeing isn't a fixed photograph. It's a living painting, redrawn each time you remember it. Memory feels solid, but it isn't. The mind rebuilds the past every time it visits it. Scientists call this constructive memory, and it may be one of the most human things we do. Each memory is like a mosaic assembled from scattered fragments. A smell from one day, a phrase from another, a feeling that didn't even belong to that moment but slips in any way. When you recall an event, the brain gathers these pieces and stitches them together. The pattern is familiar enough that you recognize it as your past, but it's never identical to the one before. This process explains why memories can fade, shift, or even change meaning as we grow. The network that holds them, centered in the hippocampus, isn't a storage box, it's a workshop. The neurons there light up in patterns, representing the sequence of what happened, but they also connect to regions that process emotion, context, and imagination. When those connections activate again, the memory becomes fluid. It softens. The brain updates it like a document being edited, saving the new version as though it were the original. You can think of it like a painter revisiting a canvas years later. The old strokes are still visible beneath the new ones, but the light, the tone, the intention have changed. What was once bright might now feel muted. What once seemed painful might appear almost gentle. The picture is both old and new, layered in time. That's why you can't step into the same memory twice. Each return brings a different you, wiser, sadder, calmer, and the moment reshapes itself to match. We sometimes say, "I remember it clearly," but what we really mean is, "I remember what it means to me now." The content of the memory, who said what you wore, where you stood, may not be as important as its emotional outline. The feeling anchors it more than the facts. There's a quiet grace in this imperfection. It allows us to adapt, to survive loss, to learn. If memory were as rigid as film, we'd be trapped in the first version of every story, unable to forgive, unable to grow. The brain's willingness to alter the past is not a flaw. It's an act of mercy. It helps us carry our history without being crushed by it. Consider a childhood argument that once left you hurt. When you recall it years later, you might notice something new. The tone in your parents' voice, the fear behind their anger, the love buried inside a harsh word. That discovery doesn't erase what happened, but it changes its shape. It becomes lighter. The brain quietly edits not to deceive, but to protect. Sometimes this reconstruction goes too far. We fill in gaps with imagination, turning half-remembered scenes into confident stories. That's how false memories can form. A photograph, a suggestion, or even a dream can blend into the past until it feels true. Yet this same mechanism, the flexibility of recall, is also what allows therapy and reflection to work. When you revisit a memory intentionally, in a safe, calm state, you open it to change. You can attach new meaning to it. Neuroscientists call this process reconsolidation, but you can think of it as emotional rewriting. Inside the brain, the chemistry is simple but beautiful. When you recall a memory, it briefly becomes unstable, like clay warmed in the hands. For a short window of time, it can be reshaped before it hardens again. Add new information, a new feeling, or a new interpretation, and it solidifies in that form. In this way, the past is not behind you. It's inside you, continually sculpted by the present. That's why people sometimes describe remembering as travelling. You close your eyes, and the years fall away. You stand in a younger version of yourself, looking out through the same eyes. It feels like time travel because in a sense it is. The same brain networks light up when you recall the past and when you imagine the future. The mind treats both as experiences to be lived through. In that flicker of recall, you step outside the steady march of seconds and inhabit another version of now. Memory is elastic not only in content but also in colour. When you're sad, old memories darken. When you're happy, even sorrowful moments may glow with a different light. The emotions of the present flow backward, tinting the canvas of the past. You can't view history without the lens of the current self. The painter, after all, has changed hands. This interplay between remembering and feeling is what gives life its depth. Without it, we'd live in a flat timeline, a monotone string of facts. Instead, we live in a layered world, a collage of reinterpreted moments, each slightly adjusted to make sense of who we are today. Our memories don't just tell us what happened, they tell us who we believe ourselves to be, and that belief can evolve. A failure once felt like an ending can become years later a quiet beginning. A goodbye can transform into gratitude. Every time we recall an event and find new meaning in it, we perform a small act of time travel, not moving our bodies, but shifting our perspective. In this way, the past never truly settles. It ripples, breathes, responds to the present moment. We are not prisoners of our memories, but participants in their creation. And if time is a story, then memory is the narrator, editing, refining, and sometimes forgiving the pages as it reads them aloud. So the next time you find yourself drifting into an old memory, notice how it feels rather than what it shows. The walls, the faces, the voices, they may all change slightly. That's not a flaw in your mind. It's proof of life continuing inside the memory itself. The past is not a distant place you once visited. It's a living part of you, always being rewritten by the person you've become. There's a strange moment that happens when you're absolutely sure you remember something, yet it never took place. Maybe it was a detail in a story told by someone else that you later swore you'd seen yourself. Maybe it was an imagined conversation that feels so vivid you can recall the tone of voice, the place, even the colour of the sky. That certainty feels like proof, but in truth, memory can be an expert illusionist. It doesn't need to lie deliberately. It only needs to fill in the gaps. Researchers have spent decades studying how easy it is to shape memory. In one classic experiment, volunteers watched a short film of a car accident. Later, when asked questions about it, some were told the cars had bumped, others that they had smashed. The single word changed everything. Those who heard smashed later insisted there had been broken glass, even though there wasn't. The mind doesn't just store information, it tells a story, and stories are malleable. Each retelling becomes a new edition, slightly edited to fit what feels true rather than what was. That's why eyewitness testimony, though heartfelt, is often unreliable. Memory is shaped by emotion, suggestion, and expectation. When someone insists they saw it with their own eyes, what they really mean is that their mind assembled a version of events convincing enough to feel real. It's not deceit, it's the brain's way of creating coherence. The mind dislikes gaps. When it finds one, it stitches it closed with imagination. But this flexibility, deceptive as it seems, is also what makes memory human. A computer stores data with precision. It never misremembers, but it also never interprets, never forgives, never finds new meaning. A perfect memory would be unbearable. Every wound would remain fresh, every mistake vivid. The soft edges of forgetting are a gift. They allow us to smooth the sharp corners of the past, to turn chaos into narrative, to make sense of pain. False memories reveal not only how fragile recall is, but how creative it can be. When you imagine an event in enough detail, your brain activates the same networks used for real experience. To the hippocampus and the visual cortex, imagination and memory overlap like colours blending on a watercolour palette. The more you picture it, the stronger those neural traces become, until imagination leaves fingerprints indistinguishable from memory. That's why dreams, stories, and even films can feel like things that happen to us. Our brains treat them as experiences to be filed alongside reality. This is why nostalgia often feels more golden than the days it recalls. The mind softens the edges, amplifies the light, fills in what it wishes had been there. The result isn't a lie, it's an emotional truth. The memory becomes a reflection not of the past itself, but of how we long to remember it. This reshaping doesn't only apply to joyful moments, even sorrow can be rewritten. Over time, the sting of a painful event can fade into something gentler. The emotion changes, and with it, the story. There is an experiment that illustrates this perfectly. Participants were shown a list of words: bed, rest, awake, tired, dream. Later, when asked to recall the words, most insisted that the word sleep had been among them. It hadn't. But because every other word related to the idea of sleep, the brain automatically inserted it. The mind didn't err, it reasoned. It saw a pattern and completed it. This small test, repeated thousands of times, shows that the act of remembering is also the act of reasoning. We don't retrieve, we reconstruct. False memories also emerge in group settings, where people share stories and unintentionally synchronize their recollections. A friend remembers a holiday and adds a small detail: a cafe, a song, a sudden rainstorm. You nod, and soon your own memory incorporates it. Years later, you'll swear you were the one who noticed the rain. The boundaries between personal and shared history dissolve quietly, replaced by a collective version that feels right. Families, communities, and entire nations do this too, reshaping their memories into stories that fit the identity they want to believe in. Yet there's something strangely comforting about that imperfection. It means memory isn't just a record of where we've been, it's a portrait of who we are becoming. Every small distortion, every recoloured scene is a clue to what matters most to us. What we emphasise, exaggerate, or forget reveals our emotional priorities. The mind protects what it values by making the story survivable. If you close your eyes now and picture your earliest birthday, you might see flashes of colour, a candle, maybe the curve of a smile. Are those real? Maybe not entirely, but does it matter? Those fragments carry truth, even if they don't match the facts. They're the shape your mind gave to joy. The scene may not have existed in that exact form, but the feeling did. And in the end, that's what memory is built to preserve. We sometimes fear that false memories mean our minds are untrustworthy, but they may simply be telling us that truth is larger than accuracy. Accuracy belongs to machines. Meaning belongs to us. When memory bends, it often bends toward coherence, compassion, or survival. It tries to tell a story that helps us live with ourselves. Perhaps that's the quiet lesson behind this gentle deception. That memory is not a courtroom, but a canvas. We add colour where we need warmth, soften lines where they hurt too much, and highlight the parts that remind us we were loved. The painting may never match the photograph, but it carries a deeper resemblance to the heart that made it. And so, when you find yourself wondering whether something happened the way you recall, let the uncertainty rest. The past is not a fixed point. It's a conversation between who you were and who you are now. Memory listens, corrects, and sometimes kindly lies. It doesn't mean you're lost in illusion. It means your mind is doing what it was designed to do, turning raw experience into meaning. The truth is that every remembered moment is a blend of fact and feeling, of evidence and emotion. And if that mixture leans gently toward comfort, maybe that's not deception at all. Maybe it's compassion, time's quiet way of letting us live with what we've lived through. Memory has a tender secret. It is never truly finished. Each time you return to a moment, it stirs, loosens, and reshapes itself in your hands. Scientists call this process reconsolidation, but you might think of it as the mind's way of allowing mercy. When you recall something, especially something that once hurt, the brain briefly opens the memory, softens its edges, and gives you a chance to rewrite the feeling that lives inside it. Then it stores it again, subtly changed. It's not a deletion, it's a renewal. Imagine your memory as a library filled with countless pages of your life. Each shelf holds fragments, birthdays, heartbreaks, the scent of rain on a morning long gone. When you revisit one of those pages, the ink doesn't stay still. The story begins to breathe again, and your current self, with new knowledge, new calm, can leave gentle fingerprints on it. When you put it back, it carries your touch. This biological grace happens quietly, without effort. Inside your brain, when you remember, networks of neurons reactivate, especially those in the hippocampus and amygdala, the regions that hold both story and emotion. The chemicals that stabilize memory, like the proteins that fix connections between neurons, temporarily dissolve. In that window, the memory becomes pliable, like clay warmed by the sun. Add a new emotional tone or a new understanding, and the clay takes a different shape before hardening again. The brain has rewritten its own history, not the facts, but the feeling. You can feel this when you revisit something that once broke your heart. Maybe it was a goodbye, or a mistake you couldn't forgive yourself for. In the beginning, the memory stings like a shard of glass, but over time, if you return to it gently, maybe after years of distance, the sharpness dulls. You notice details that were invisible before, the kindness in someone's eyes, the strength you found in surviving it, the way the world quietly carried on. The moment itself hasn't changed, but your understanding of it has. Through that understanding, the pain transforms into something else, a softer truth that doesn't need to wound anymore. In therapy, this process is used with intention. A person recalls a painful event while feeling safe, calm, and supported. Within that emotional safety, the brain replays the memory, but this time without the same surge of fear or helplessness. The new emotional context rewires the old pattern. It's as though the mind adds a line to the story. Yes, this happened, but I survived. The neurons literally fire together in a new sequence, linking the old memory with present peace. That is not just poetry. It's measurable in brain scans. The same circuits that once screamed danger now whisper calm. Even outside therapy, life naturally invites this rewriting. We do it every time we look back and realize that something once unbearable taught us something vital. We do it when we can finally laugh at our own younger mistakes, or when a loss that once hollowed us now fills us with gratitude for what it meant. The mind doesn't change the past, it changes your relationship to it. And that, perhaps, is the truest form of healing. If you've ever found an old letter, one written in anger or heartbreak, you may have felt this shift. At the time you wrote it, the words burned. They were carved from pain. But years later, when you read them, the fire is gone. You can sense the person you were, still raw and frightened, but from the safety of distance. The letter hasn't changed. You have. The act of remembering bridges those two selves, letting them finally meet and perhaps forgive. This same flexibility allows us to reinterpret joy as well. A moment that once seemed ordinary can grow luminous in hindsight. The walk you barely noticed becomes sacred once you realize it was the last one with someone you loved. The laughter you took for granted becomes a small treasure after it's gone. The past is alive because it keeps gaining new meanings as life unfolds. Every experience you live now ripples backward, colouring what came before. You might think of memory as a great tapestry woven in layers. Each new thread doesn't replace the old. It changes the pattern slightly. The bright threads of gratitude, compassion and perspective weave through the darker ones, softening the contrast. Over time, the fabric of your story becomes richer, more forgiving. You can still see where it was torn, but those scars turn into part of the design. This constant weaving is what makes human consciousness so beautifully fluid. It means you are not the sum of frozen memories. You are the artist who keeps repainting them. The person you were 10 years ago would not remember your life exactly as you do now, because you carry more light, more understanding, more context. And that difference isn't a flaw, it's a sign of growth. The past you remember is always slightly rewritten by the person you've become. There is something deeply peaceful in this realization. It means no memory has to remain a prison. You can visit it, acknowledge it, and breathe new air into it. Even the most painful recollections can lose their sharpness when seen through the eyes of compassion. The mind, left to its natural rhythm, tends toward healing, just as a cut tends to close or a storm eventually clears. The philosopher once said, "Time heals all wounds," but perhaps it's not time itself that heals. It's what time allows, the chance to return, to refeel, to reinterpret. Each revisiting is like sunlight passing through stained glass. Same light, different colours. You never stand in the same memory twice because your heart keeps changing the hue. In the end, reconsolidation isn't just a neurological mechanism, it's a quiet metaphor for being alive. The ability to reshape memory means we're not trapped by what happened. We're in conversation with it. The past speaks, the present answers, and together they write a future with softer edges. Every act of remembering is also an act of creation, a chance to weave old pain into wisdom, to turn the heavy stone of experience into something that can finally float. So when a memory visits you, one that makes your chest tighten or your eyes fill, try not to push it away. Sit with it for a moment. Let it unfold, let it breathe. Ask it what it's trying to show you now, not what it showed you then. You might find that the same memory that once haunted you now offers a lesson, or even a blessing. It's not erasure, it's evolution. The moment remains, but it softens. And in that softening you travel through time in the gentlest way imaginable, not to change the story, but to understand it anew. When you close your eyes and replay a memory, it feels like watching a film projected inside your mind. You can see scenes, hear voices, even feel the echo of an old heartbeat. But have you ever noticed that while you're remembering, there's also a part of you quietly watching the memory. That inner observer, the one who sees without judgment, never seems to age. It's there in every recollection, every dream, every flicker of awareness. It's the steady light behind the moving images. That light is consciousness itself. We often think of consciousness as something that lives in the present moment, the I that looks out through your eyes and calls itself me. But in truth, consciousness moves freely through time. It can drift backward into childhood or leap forward into imagined futures. You can sit perfectly still and yet travel decades in an instant. Scientists sometimes call this ability mental time travel, but that phrase doesn't capture how intimate it feels. You aren't flying through space or bending physics. You're simply letting awareness turn toward another chapter of its own story. It's remarkable how easily this happens. A scent, a chord from an old song, a flicker of light through a window. Any of these can pull you backward faster than any machine ever could. Suddenly you're standing in a memory so vivid that the years collapse. The body you inhabit now may be older, slower, wiser. But for a moment, you're living inside another version of yourself. The past breathes again, not as a static picture, but as a place within the landscape of mind. Consciousness, it seems, carries a map with no real borders, only attention deciding where to linger. Neuroscience shows that the same brain regions activate when you recall the past and when you imagine the future. The hippocampus, which organizes memory, links directly to networks that simulate possibilities. The brain, in its quiet genius, doesn't distinguish much between what was and what could be. To it, both are experiences. The only difference is direction, whether awareness is reaching backward to relive or forward to anticipate. In that sense, your sense of self is like a traveller walking a trail in both directions, leaving footprints and retracing them, weaving a continuity out of change. But here's where it becomes beautifully paradoxical. While consciousness moves through memories, it also remains untouched by them. Think of yourself watching an old home video. You see a younger you, laughing, crying, perhaps unaware of what's to come. You might feel tenderness or embarrassment or nostalgia. Yet the one watching that video is not caught inside it. That quiet observer exists outside the frame. It notices the story without being bound to it. The same is true when you remember. The mind replays scenes from the past, but awareness, that silent witness, simply sees. It doesn't age with the story, it only illuminates it. Philosophers have long struggled to define what this awareness truly is. Some call it the mind's mirror, others describe it as the stage upon which thought and feeling perform. Whatever name we give it, it seems to exist before time. It doesn't measure hours or years. It doesn't live in yesterday or tomorrow. It's the space in which those concepts appear. The French philosopher Henri Bergson once suggested that consciousness is not something in time. Rather, time flows within consciousness, like a current within a vast ocean. You don't pass through time. Time passes through you. That idea might sound abstract, but you can feel it directly. Think of a moment when you were so absorbed, watching a sunset, listening to music, holding someone's hand, that time seemed to disappear. In that pause, awareness remains, but the measuring mind goes silent. You become simply the act of witnessing. The edges of past and future blur, and all that's left is presence, the self that watches without counting. This awareness is what makes the continuity of life possible. Every morning you wake up in a slightly different body, cells renewed, memories reshaped, yet you still say, "I am the same person." What creates that sense of sameness is not the body or even the memory, but the observer who's been watching it all along. The flow of consciousness stitches each day to the next. It is the invisible thread that binds every version of you into a single unfolding story. It's comforting to know that there's something constant within change. because if you are the one watching the movie, then the scenes, joy, loss, fear, love, are not permanent states. They are movements of light across the screen. You can feel them fully without being consumed. Even pain, when seen clearly, softens in the light of awareness. It becomes part of the film's depth, not its prison. Modern neuroscience supports this idea in gentle ways. When people practice mindfulness, simply observing thoughts and sensations as they arise, the regions of the brain tied to emotional reactivity quiet down. The prefrontal cortex, associated with perspective and compassion, becomes more active. It's as if, by identifying with the watcher rather than the movie, the brain rewires itself to experience time differently. Moments of distress shorten. Moments of calm expand. The mind learns to rest in awareness itself, rather than being pulled along by the flow of passing thoughts. If consciousness is the projector light, then memory is the film it shines through. Each frame is a moment, and the light reveals it just long enough for you to experience it before moving to the next. The movie appears to move, but the light never does. The illusion of time passing is simply the rhythm of awareness illuminating one frame after another. Of course, even this metaphor has limits. The light and the film are not truly separate. Without memory, consciousness would have nothing to illuminate. Without consciousness, memory would remain dark. Together they form the living texture of experience, the dance between what changes and what endures. So when you sit quietly and let your thoughts drift, notice how they come and go. One memory rises, another fades, a worry appears, then dissolves. Through it all, something remains, the presence that notices. It doesn't judge or cling, it just is. That presence is the most intimate part of you, and yet it never carries the weight of time. It doesn't belong to yesterday or tomorrow. It belongs only to awareness itself, the timeless witness within the flow of your days. Perhaps this is what ancient philosophers meant when they spoke of the self behind the self, the one who experiences but also watches the experiencing. In that realization lies a quiet freedom, because once you know that you are the watcher, you no longer need to fight the movie. You can let it unfold. You can let moments come and go, trusting that the light remains steady even as the scenes change. And so, in every act of remembering, you are not only revisiting the past, you're also glimpsing the timeless space that allows the past to exist at all. You're not trapped inside the story. You're the awareness that makes storytelling possible. And when you rest there, time loses its urgency. You see that you are never racing through life's moments. You are always the one quietly watching them pass, the self that never moves, even as everything else does. Time feels constant only because we rarely stop to watch it happening. Most days it moves unnoticed, like air or gravity. But when awareness turns inward, you begin to see something unusual, that time is not a steady current flowing past you. It is a stage built fresh in every moment, and consciousness is both the actor and the audience. You step into each instant, speak your line, feel your emotion, and then step off again, leaving the next scene to unfold. In this theatre, nothing repeats exactly. Even when the story feels familiar, the lighting is new, the air different, the self slightly altered. When you focus deeply on something, a sound, a task, a face, the theatre quiets. The audience of thoughts goes still. Psychologists call this flow, but it might be better described as the suspension of time. A painter lost in colour, a musician lost in rhythm, a runner lost in breath. All of them slip into a timeless awareness. They stop counting minutes because the part of the brain that tracks duration relaxes. The inner clock goes silent, replaced by pure immersion. To consciousness, these moments are infinite and weightless. Only when the curtain lifts, when awareness returns to counting, do we realise that hours have passed. In contrast, boredom and anxiety stretch time. When you sit in a waiting room or watch a download bar inch forward, your attention splits. Part of you watches the clock, part of you resists it. The result is friction, time dragging against awareness. Seconds become heavy. It's not that the minutes truly lengthen, it's that consciousness is caught in the space between wanting and waiting. When the mind struggles against the moment, time grows teeth. This shows something subtle but profound. Awareness shapes the texture of time. When you merge with what is happening, time dissolves. When you pull away, it thickens. The physicists describe time as a dimension woven into space, curving with gravity and energy. But within the mind, it curves with attention and emotion. In this inner cosmos, a heartbeat of wonder can last forever, while a long afternoon can vanish into nothing. Think of how a child watches raindrops race down a window. Each drop feels like an entire event, full of suspense and resolution. The child's mind doesn't rush ahead, it follows the water's path completely. That's why children live in an endless present. Their awareness hasn't yet learned to escape. Adults, in contrast, spend much of their lives elsewhere, replaying the past, predicting the next step, imagining outcomes. We trade immersion for control, and time hardens around us. But now and then we catch ourselves again, maybe while watching light move through dust in a quiet room. And for a breathless moment, we feel that same unbroken now. That moment is not small. It is the doorway through which timelessness enters our days. Mindfulness practices have begun to study this doorway scientifically. When people spend even a few minutes simply noticing their breath, the gentle rise and fall, the pauses in between, their brains change rhythm. The networks that calculate and plan become quieter, while those that sense and feel grow stronger. Blood flow shifts from the busy, frontal lobes to the deeper centers that track the body's rhythm. In that shift, time perception slows. The breath becomes a pendulum of presence. You realize that every inhalation and exhalation marks not the passage of time, but the return to it. You don't need a meditation hall to experience this. You can try it while washing dishes, watching steam curl, or feeling warm water over your hands. The mind will want to hurry, to jump ahead to what comes next. But if you stay, if you truly listen to the sound of the running water, seconds will lose their edges. You will find yourself in the same timeless awareness that a composer feels while writing a melody, or a traveller feels while staring into a vast landscape. The moment opens wider than you expect, and you realise it was never narrow to begin with. There's another curious thing about this theatre of awareness. The scenery changes according to your inner state. When you're happy, the world seems to glow with motion. When you're grieving, it slows to a crawl. The same hour can hold either eternity or emptiness depending on how you inhabit it. The clock measures what it can, but it cannot measure presence. A minute lived in full awareness feels more spacious than a day spent distracted. You can sense this difference even in language. We say killing time when we're detached, losing track of time when we're absorbed, and wasting time when we regret not being present. These phrases reveal how emotional our experience of time really is. It isn't something outside of us. It's a reflection of how we meet each moment. Time is elastic because consciousness is. The neuroscientists studying perception often talk about the integration window, the brain's way of stitching together fragments of sensation into what feels like a continuous present. They describe it as roughly 3 seconds long, a moving bubble of awareness that glides through reality. But what happens inside that bubble is entirely up to attention. If you fill it with noise and worry, it shrinks. If you fill it with silence and curiosity, it expands. The formula isn't mathematical, it's emotional. The brain's timing system responds to meaning. The more meaningful the experience, the slower it feels. This may be why sacred rituals across cultures often begin with stillness. Whether it's prayer, deep breathing, or the slow lighting of a candle, these actions invite awareness to widen. They pull you out of the narrow corridor of seconds and back into the open field of presence. In that widening, time seems to bend, not because the universe changes, but because your perception of it does. The physicist might call it relativity. The mystic calls it awakening. Awareness and time are so deeply intertwined that it's impossible to tell where one ends and the other begins. Consciousness gives time its heartbeat, and time gives consciousness its melody. Together they create the rhythm of existence, and within that rhythm you're both participant and witness. The actor who speaks the lines and the observer who hears them echo. The theatre of awareness is not somewhere you enter, it's where you have always been. The curtains only close when attention drifts. The next time you find yourself waiting for an answer, for sleep, for a season to change, notice the weight of each second. Try not to fight it. Instead, lean in. Feel how the mind wants to rush, and then gently let it rest. You'll find that the waiting itself begins to dissolve. Time softens when it's seen clearly. Awareness doesn't need to escape it, because awareness was never inside time to begin with. It only borrowed its rhythm for a while, and maybe that's what freedom truly is. Not having more time, but being fully alive within the time you already have, seeing each moment as the quiet stage where the universe performs, and you, the watcher, sit in perfect stillness as the play unfolds. If you pause for a moment and think about who you were 10 years ago, something curious happens. You can see that earlier version of yourself, almost as if it were another person. Younger, perhaps, uncertain, living in a world that feels smaller or brighter. Yet you also feel that it was you. The same thread runs through both, a faint but unbroken sense of I. How can we stand in the present and still carry the imprint of so many past selves? How can we live fully in one instant while remaining stitched to every other? This is the paradox at the heart of being conscious. You're always in the present, yet you never truly leave the past. Your memories, beliefs, and habits arrive with you like quiet companions, shaping what you see and how you interpret it. Even the now you think you're living is infused with traces of yesterday. Neuroscience reveals that what we experience as the present moment is already slightly delayed, a half second behind reality. The brain gathers sensory information, processes it, and assembles it into a coherent picture. By the time you feel the moment, it's already history. The present is a reconstruction, a memory being written in real time. This soft delay doesn't make experience less real. Instead, it reveals how deeply the mind blends time. Every second you live is a small overlap of then and now, of what just happened and what you expect will happen next. Consciousness glides across this seam so seamlessly that you never notice the stitching. You feel continuous because awareness smooths the joins between moments, like a film projector making still images appear to move. The movement is illusion, yet it's also life itself. Philosophers have long debated what this means. Some hold to presentism, the idea that only the current moment exists. The past is gone, the future unborn. Others believe in eternalism, a gentler view that all moments exist simultaneously, past, present, and future coexisting like pages already printed in a book. You can only read one page at a time, but the rest are there, waiting. From that perspective, nothing truly vanishes. You, the reader, are simply moving your attention along the lines of a cosmic story already written. Physics leans softly toward this idea. According to relativity, time isn't absolute. It stretches and folds depending on movement and gravity. Two observers in different conditions can disagree about the order of events, and both can be right. There is no universal now that every being shares. The universe, in a strange but comforting way, doesn't experience time the way we do. It contains all moments, birth, decay, laughter, silence, like a vast landscape. We are travellers within that landscape, moving through it one heartbeat at a time, believing we are progressing when we might simply be shifting perspective. But consciousness doesn't need equations to understand this. You can feel it in small human ways. Think of listening to a favourite song. Each note fades, yet somehow remains present in your mind as the next one begins. You hear the melody as a whole, not as separate sounds. Awareness gathers them together, holding the past and present in the same embrace. This is the paradox of experience. To perceive continuity, you must be both in the moment and slightly beyond it. Dreams offer another glimpse of this timelessness. In a dream, you might relive events from years ago, blended with scenes that have not yet occurred. The mind moves freely through time, unconcerned with order. When you wake, it's as though your consciousness had wandered through an invisible corridor connecting all versions of you. That corridor never really closes. Even while awake, we move through it whenever memory or imagination takes us by the hand. This understanding can change how you see the past. If all moments coexist, then your former selves still shimmer somewhere in that vast fabric of time. Not frozen, but quietly existing as part of the larger whole. The child looking at the stars, the friend saying goodbye, the dreamer planning their future. They're all there, woven into the same tapestry. You can't walk back to them physically, but you can feel their presence in the consciousness that observes them. The observer never left, and what of the future? The same awareness that remembers can also project forward. It's not prophecy, it's potential. Each imagined future is a page waiting to be read. Your choices, your attention, decide which lines are illuminated. Perhaps that's what it means to shape destiny. Not to alter the book, but to decide which parts of it you'll inhabit most fully. In ordinary life, these ideas reveal themselves in gentle moments. When you look at an old photograph, you don't just see a person from the past, you feel them inside you. Their hopes and fears still ripple through your body. Your heartbeat now is the echo of all the ones before it. When you plan for tomorrow, the future leans back into the present, influencing your thoughts and emotions right now. Past and future breathe through each other, and consciousness is the lung that keeps them alive. Meditation traditions often describe this awareness as the witness. When you sit quietly, breathing, and notice thoughts passing by, you begin to sense that the one who observes the thoughts is not bound to them. It doesn't change when they change. It isn't younger or older, hurried or still. It simply watches. In that watching, you touch a space outside time, the still point that connects all movement. The philosopher T.S. Eliot once called it the still point of the turning world, where past and future are gathered into a single presence. This idea doesn't ask you to abandon daily life or physics. It only invites you to see that the line between moments is thinner than you think. Each breath carries the past into the future. Each heartbeat is both ending and beginning. When you remember, you travel backward. When you imagine, you travel forward. Yet in both, the same awareness remains unchanged. That awareness is the bridge, the observer standing in the doorway between here and then. Understanding this can bring a certain calm. You realize there's no need to chase time or resist it. You already exist across its span, like a thread woven through every scene of your life. The version of you reading these words and the one you'll be tomorrow are not strangers. They are frames of the same film, lit by the same light of awareness. The paradox resolves itself when you stop trying to separate them. You were never just here or there. You have always been both, a flicker of presence shining across the whole theatre of time. So when you catch yourself longing for the past or fearing the future, take a gentle breath. Feel the continuity within you, the same observer who has seen countless mornings, losses, and laughter. That witness is not bound by age or chronology. It is the part of you that has always existed at the meeting point of every moment. To rest there is to understand that being here and then were never opposites. They were always one and the same. There's a saying that you can never step into the same river twice. The The water keeps moving, and so do you. Memory is much the same. You can return to its banks, you can feel the current on your skin, but it will never be the same stream that once carried you. The moment you try to revisit, it changes, and so do you. That's the quiet art of remembering, visiting without returning. Every time you recall a memory, you aren't travelling back to a fixed point. You're meeting a living echo shaped by who you are now. Imagine holding a photograph that you've painted over again and again. The first image is still underneath, the outlines of faces, the landscape of that day, but new. Colours have been brushed on top. The warm tones of understanding, the softer shades of forgiveness, maybe even the faint light of humour. The result isn't false, it's alive. Memory, like that photograph, becomes more art than archive. This is what therapists call restorying. It's not about rewriting the facts of what happened, but rewriting the meaning those facts carry. Suppose you remember a time you failed at something important, a relationship, a dream, a promise. The memory might sit heavy, its borders sharp. But if you return to it with distance, from a place of gentleness, the edges blur. You begin to see not just the loss, but the lesson, the courage it took to try, the kindness that eventually arrived, the strength that grew quietly underneath. You can't change the event, but you can change the shape it leaves behind. In your brain, this restoring happens through a conversation between memory and emotion. The hippocampus, the part that organizes the story, connects with the amygdala, which colors it with feeling. When you revisit a memory, those regions light up together, reactivating the emotion that once lived there. But if you're calm while recalling it, the amygdala signal softens. The fear or shame that used to flood your body no longer rises with the same force. In that gentler state, new pathways form. The brain quietly learns a different ending. Think of it like walking through an old house that used to scare you as a child. You turn on the lights now, the same creaky stairs, the same closed door, but this time your steps are steady. You notice details that once went unseen, the smell of dust and wood, the way the light falls through the window. The fear doesn't vanish, but it transforms into understanding. You've visited the memory, but you haven't been trapped in it. That's the key difference between reliving and re-experiencing. One keeps you stuck in the story, the other lets you see the story clearly from the outside. Our culture often tells us to move on from the past, as if leaving it behind were the only form of healing. But the mind doesn't work that way. What you resist keeps its grip. What you face softly begins to release. Returning to a memory with compassion isn't regression. It's reconciliation. It's acknowledging that part of you still waiting to be seen, to be understood. Healing doesn't mean erasing the past. It means accepting it as part of the design, a thread woven through the fabric of who you are. Some people fear that looking back will reopen old wounds, but the truth is wounds already hold memory within them. Avoiding them doesn't erase the story, it just buries it deeper. Revisiting allows light to reach those hidden corners. Light doesn't force anything, it simply reveals. And in that revelation, the pain often loses its authority. It becomes something you can look at, hold, and eventually place back on the shelf without trembling. You might notice this naturally in small, everyday ways. A song that once made you cry now brings a kind of quiet smile. A street you couldn't walk down after heartbreak one day feels neutral again. The world hasn't changed, you have. Your nervous system has learned a new response. Where fear once lived, peace begins to move in. This is neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to grow new connections, translated into something almost poetic. You've taught your mind a new language for the same story. It's why nostalgia, even when bittersweet, feels so safe. It's the brain revisiting emotional landmarks, no longer in survival mode, but as a traveller walking through memory at sunset. You're not escaping the past. You're walking through it differently, with curiosity instead of pain. And in doing so, you loosen time's hold on you. One simple practice can reveal this in everyday life. The next time a painful memory arises, resist the urge to turn away. Instead, breathe slowly. Imagine yourself walking through that memory as if it were a place. Notice what has changed, the colours, the temperature, your own posture. Then, quietly, thank the version of you who lived it. They did the best they could with what they knew. That small act of gratitude changes the chemistry of the moment. The brain pairs the old memory with a new emotion, compassion. You've just rewritten the feeling tone of the past without touching the facts. There's a kind of grace in knowing you can visit your history without getting lost in it. The past doesn't vanish, it evolves. It becomes less like a chain and more like a bridge, a structure you can walk across to understand how you arrived here. That bridge doesn't collapse after crossing. It remains a quiet part of your inner landscape. When people describe profound healing, they often say, "It feels lighter." That lightness isn't forgetting, it's the weight of judgment lifting. It's the understanding that you don't need to fix what happened, only the way you carry it. Memory will always change shape, that's its nature. But how you meet it determines whether it becomes a burden or a teacher. You may never be able to step into the same river twice, but you can learn to float. The current no longer drags you backward, it carries you gently forward, and sometimes, if you close your eyes, you can feel both directions at once. The past flowing beneath you, the present holding you up. You're not escaping what was, you're simply visiting quietly and letting it show you how far you've come. When we remember pain, we often brace for impact. The body tenses, the breath shortens, the heart speeds up as if the event were happening again. Memory does not distinguish sharply between what is real and what is recalled. The same neural circuits that once carried fear can light up at the faint echo of it. But there's another truth, quieter and far more merciful. Those same pathways that once learned to fear can learn to feel safe again. The act of healing is not about silencing memory, it is about listening to it differently. In the brain, every emotional experience leaves a pattern, a trace of chemistry and connection. The amygdala, that small almond-shaped region deep within, is the sentinel of threat and safety. When danger strikes, it rings its alarm, flooding the body with adrenaline and urgency. The hippocampus, its close partner, records the context. Where you were, what you saw, who was near. Together they imprint both the story and the feeling. But these imprints aren't permanent carvings in stone. They're living connections, flexible and responsive. Every time you revisit a memory, those connections light up again, not as ghosts, but as circuits ready to learn anew. Therapists who study trauma have noticed something remarkable. When people recall a painful memory in a calm, grounded state, the brain reopens that circuit for editing. The chemicals that stabilize the memory loosen for a short window, a few hours perhaps. In that space, the story can be paired with a new emotion, safety, compassion, understanding. When the memory hardens again, it carries traces of that new feeling. What once triggered panic might over time bring peace. Neuroscientists call this memory reconsolidation, but you could call it rewriting with kindness. Think of a song that once broke your heart. At first, every note pierced you. You couldn't listen without feeling that same ache. But years later, you hear it again, and instead of pain, you feel warmth, the sweetness of survival, the tenderness of remembering how much you cared. The song hasn't changed. The chords still rise and fall in the same way, but the listener, you, has. The heart has learned a new way to hear. This gentle shift is the essence of healing the past. You don't erase the melody, you learn to dance differently to it. In the same way, when you recall a difficult memory, the goal isn't to drown it out, but to listen again with a new tempo of understanding. It's a conversation between your past and present selves. The younger version of you, frightened, confused, hurting, finally gets to speak. and the present you, wiser and steadier, finally gets to answer. It helps to remember that the nervous system is designed to learn safety, not just threat. The same signals that once screamed danger can, under different circumstances, whisper you're safe now. In therapy rooms, this is why people are encouraged to ground themselves, feet on the floor, steady breath, eyes open. The body's calm signals travel upward to the brain, reassuring the amygdala that the moment being recalled is not happening now. Slowly the alarm quiets, and memory becomes story rather than experience. You can try a version of this on your own. When a painful memory surfaces, don't fight it or chase it away. Sit somewhere comfortable. Feel your breath, not forced, just noticed. Let the memory appear like a visitor at the door. Instead of asking, "Why are you here again?" ask, "What are you trying to show me?" The difference between those questions is the difference between fear and curiosity. One keeps the door closed, the other invites light in. As you listen, notice how the body reacts. Tightness, warmth, trembling. All of it is part of the conversation. These sensations are how old emotions speak. They are not punishments, they are messages. If you can meet them with calm awareness, they begin to transform. The energy that once powered pain begins to power understanding. This isn't metaphorical. Brain imaging shows that when people recall emotional memories while consciously regulating their breath or posture, the neural networks of fear and calm start to overlap. They build a bridge between reactivity and reflection. The mind learns that the same story can carry a different tone. Healing doesn't demand that you forgive immediately or forget completely. It only asks that you allow yourself to witness what happened without becoming it again. Each time you do, the emotional charge lessens. The memory becomes less like a storm and more like rain heard from a distance, still part of the weather, but no longer drenching you. Sometimes people worry that softening a painful memory dishonors what they went through. But healing is not betrayal, it's acknowledgement. It's saying, "I see you, and I'm ready to hold you differently." Pain demands to be felt, but not forever. Once it has been seen and understood, it naturally begins to dissolve. The mind is not trying to erase history. It's trying to create continuity, to weave that moment into a larger story where it finally makes sense. You might notice this in the smallest of details. A place that once made your chest tighten now feels neutral. A date on the calendar that used to sting passes quietly. These are the quiet signs of integration. The past has found its place within you, no longer floating like debris. It has become part of the foundation. You're not carrying the memory anymore, you're standing on it. There's an image that captures this beautifully. Imagine an old crack in a wall filled with golden resin, like the Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with veins of gold. The floor remains visible, but it becomes part of the beauty. The piece is stronger, more unique because of what it endured. The same principle lives in the brain and in the heart. When a once painful memory is revisited and held with care, it doesn't vanish. It glows softly with understanding. Science tells us that neurons that fire together can wire together. When you pair an old memory with new calm, new meaning, those pathways join. What used to lead only to pain now leads to wisdom. It's a quiet kind of alchemy, emotion transformed not through forgetting, but through acceptance. The formula is simple and endlessly patient. Attention plus compassion equals healing. So the next time an old hurt surfaces, don't ask, "How do I stop feeling this?" Instead, whisper, "How can I listen more gently?" You might be surprised at what you hear. Sometimes the past only repeats itself because it's waiting for you to hear the rest of the sentence. You aren't erasing anything by listening differently. You're releasing it, letting the story complete its arc, letting your nervous system exhale. In that release, you experience the truest form of time travel, You move backward only to bring something home, a piece of yourself that was left waiting in that moment, ready to be welcomed back. And when it finally returns, you realize the distance between past and present was never as wide as it seemed. It was only the space between fear and understanding, a space you now know how to cross. Forgiveness is one of those words that sounds simple until you try to live inside it. It's not a switch you can flip or a command you can follow. It's more like a long exhale after years of holding your breath. When you finally release it, you realize the weight you were carrying wasn't the memory itself, but the resistance to it. In that release, something remarkable happens. Time loosens. The past that once clung to you begins to move again. Forgiveness, in its quiet way, is a form of time travel. When you forgive, truly forgive, you aren't erasing what happened. You're changing your relationship to it. You're rewriting the emotional code that binds the event to your present. The brain treats forgiveness as a kind of reorganization. The neural pathways that once flared with anger or shame calm down, replaced by patterns associated with empathy and perspective. It's as if the mind gently closes one chapter and opens another on the same page. The story remains, but its tone changes. Consider the way an orchestra tunes before a concert. Each instrument begins out of sync, creating noise and tension. Slowly, the players adjust to one another until a shared harmony emerges. Forgiveness works the same way. The mind and heart, once at odds, begin to tune themselves toward balance. The event that once caused discord becomes part of a larger melody, one that includes pain, but also understanding. From a psychological view, forgiveness involves reframing, shifting the way you interpret the motives and meaning of a past event. When you do this, regions of the brain linked to empathy become active, particularly those in the prefrontal cortex, where reasoning and compassion live side by side. The amygdala, once alert and defensive, quiets its alarm. The chemistry of resentment gives way to serotonin and oxytocin, the subtle messengers of calm and connection. It's not magic, it's biology responding to perspective. You aren't forcing peace, you're allowing the body to remember what peace feels like. Yet forgiveness is often misunderstood. Many people resist it because they think it means approval, or forgetting, or allowing harm to continue. But forgiveness isn't the same as absolution. It doesn't excuse what happened. It transforms what it means to you. To forgive is to reclaim the power that pain once held over your timeline. It's a way of saying, I will no longer live in that room. The door may remain in your memory, but you don't have to keep walking through it. There's an ancient metaphor that fits. Imagine carrying a burning coal in your hand, planning to throw it at someone who wronged you. The problem is, you're the one being burned while you wait. Forgiveness is the moment you finally set the coal down. The flame may still exist in the world, but it no longer consumes you. The act is less about the other person, and more about freeing your own nervous system from replaying the injury. The brain, which once reactivated pain at every reminder, begins to quiet. Neural pathways that used to trigger distress fade through a process scientists call extinction learning, where old responses gradually lose strength when no longer reinforced. In softer terms, the mind learns it no longer needs to flinch. Think of someone who hurt you long ago. Maybe you've carried their shadow for years. An argument, a betrayal, a silence that never healed. The memory sits in the mind like a closed door. Each time you think of it, you brace yourself, expecting the same ache. But one day, without planning, you look at that door and feel something different. The anger feels tired, the pain less sharp. You realize you can open the door, step inside, and look around without the room collapsing. The furniture of that moment is still there, but the air has changed. You breathe differently. You've stepped through time. Forgiveness often begins as a small curiosity. What if I let this go? The question alone starts to rearrange the story. Instead of being the person wounded, you become the person witnessing the wound. And in that shift, distance appears. Distance doesn't mean detachment, it means perspective. It's like pulling back the camera in a film. You see not just the scene, but the horizon behind it. The mind recognizes that the event, once everything, is now only one frame in a larger life. There is also self-forgiveness, perhaps the hardest kind. The brain processes guilt and shame in regions tied to social emotion, meaning we literally feel the weight of moral pain as if others were judging us. But when you turn compassion inward, the same biology that softens your view of others can heal your view of yourself. The prefrontal cortex once again steps in, helping to reinterpret the past with context. I didn't know then what I know now. That single sentence rewires the emotional charge. It moves guilt toward understanding, and understanding toward peace. A helpful exercise can make this real. Imagine sitting across from your younger self, the one who made the choice you regret. Look at them as you would a child who tried their best with limited light. Tell them what you've learned since then, not as punishment but as guidance. As you speak, you'll notice something subtle. The harsh voice in your head begins to soften. The body relaxes. The present self becomes both teacher and student. You're no longer trapped in the old moment. You are its witness and its healer. Forgiveness does not happen all at once. It unfolds slowly, like dawn rising through fog. Sometimes you think it's complete, only to find another layer waiting. That's natural. Each return to the memory opens a new chance for release. The process is less a straight path than a spiral, circling closer to peace each time. The spiral itself is a form of time travel, each revolution bringing you back to the same point, but from a higher view. What science describes in terms of neural networks and emotional regulation, the heart knows simply as letting go. You can feel it when it happens. The body exhales, the mind grows quiet. The story that once owned you becomes a chapter you can finally close. Not forgotten, not erased, simply complete. The moment you forgive, the past itself exhales with you. To live this way is to understand that forgiveness is not weakness, but movement. It is the act of setting the timeline free, letting old energies flow where they were once stuck. You, the traveller, stop carrying the old versions of the story and begin to walk lightly again. The mind, the heart, and the nervous system agree for the first time in years. You are safe to move forward. So when you feel the weight of a memory press against you, pause and listen. You might hear the faintest whisper from within, a quiet invitation. It's time to come home. Because in remembering differently, you've become both the traveller and the destination, the one who left and the one who finally returned. Every generation creates a mirror for its own mind. First, it was the cave painting, then the scroll, the photograph, the hard drive. Each one was built to capture what we feared to lose, our memories. And now, in this quiet century of circuits and code, we are building mirrors that can remember on their own, machines that hold everything, words, faces, movements, even the rhythm of our hearts. It feels like progress, but beneath the glow of the screen, a question flickers. If our machines remember perfectly, what happens to us? Human memory was never meant to be perfect. Forgetting is part of its design, a kind of pruning that keeps the mind clear enough to imagine, to dream, to heal. But computers have no need to forget. Every detail stays, every mistake, every message, every photo. In this age, memory no longer fades with time. It only migrates to a server somewhere, a vast and silent ocean of recollection. The cloud, we call it, as if to make it sound soft. But what lives there is not vapour. It is every version of us that ever left a trace. Neuroscientists once mapped the human hippocampus and called it a living archive. It records the layout of our experiences, who, what, when, where. Now, engineers are attempting to imitate that architecture with devices that can store not just data, but the pattern of thoughts themselves. Experimental memory implants, first tested in animals and later in patients with memory loss, have shown that it's possible to restore the ability to form new memories by stimulating precise regions of the brain. In simple terms, the device acts like a scaffold, helping neurons strengthen their connections, the same biological process that naturally happens when we learn. The translation of that idea into technology is delicate. A pattern of electricity becomes a memory trace. A burst of digital code becomes a moment of lived experience. The dream is noble, to help those who have lost the ability to remember rejoin the timeline of their own lives. Yet it opens a philosophical question that has followed humanity since the first photograph was taken. When we outsource memory, do we lose the grace of forgetting? Imagine a future where your mind is synchronized with the device that stores every sensation you've ever had. You could relive your childhood exactly as it was. The smell of your mother's cooking, the pattern of light on your first bicycle, the sound of your friend's laughter. You could replay moments with perfect clarity. It sounds beautiful until you remember that some memories ache for a reason. Pain fades because it must. If we were forced to carry every image with equal intensity, the mind might drown in its own completeness. The human brain's small imperfections are what make it kind. Forgetting is not failure, it's mercy. The slow erosion of details allows forgiveness to grow. Time's blur softens the contrast so that what remains is not the sharp pain, but the meaning underneath. Machines, however, have no such kindness. Their recall is absolute, their timelines exact. They never confuse a face, never blur an edge. But maybe that perfection is exactly what makes them incapable of wisdom. Already we see hints of this paradox in the digital world. A photo app reminds you of what you posted 10 years ago, smiling at a person who is no longer here. A notification surfaces a message you sent in joy, now hollow with absence. These memories don't ask whether you're ready. They simply appear. In their precision, they forget that memory is also emotional timing. The human brain waits until the heart can bear to remember. The algorithm does not. If technology continues to evolve, it's likely we'll develop what scientists call neural prosthetics, external memory systems that communicate directly with the brain. They could help restore memory loss or even expand recall beyond natural limits. But there's another possibility. Such tools might also record and share subjective experience. Your memories could be backed up, downloaded, even lived by another. The line between remembering and reliving would blur. It's tempting to see this as the next step in evolution, a collective mind, a shared archive of consciousness. But before that dream comes true, we might have to confront what we're giving up. The privacy of forgetting, the intimacy of fleetingness. There's beauty in the way a memory changes when it's retold, like light refracted through a prism. Digital memories don't change, they repeat. They play back the same pattern each time. The past becomes static, preserved but lifeless, like a butterfly pinned under glass. Perhaps we were never meant to recall everything. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once said that without the ability to forget, we could not live with ourselves. Every insult, every regret, every small wound would remain fresh. The brain protects us by weaving forgetting into its rhythm, trimming the branches so that new growth can appear. Machines know nothing of growth, they only accumulate. Still, it's hard not to marvel at what these inventions can do. An elderly patient recovering from memory loss can recall his wife's face again, because of a chip no larger than a grain of rice. A blind person can navigate the world using signals sent directly into the visual cortex. A digital diary can preserve the laughter of a child long after both have aged. In these moments, technology feels like compassion, an extension of our longing to hold on to what we love. But the same tool that preserves joy also preserves pain. A database cannot distinguish between what should be remembered and what deserves to fade, so the responsibility falls back on us, the travellers between mind and machine. We must choose when to look back, when to release, and when to let the gentle blur of time do its work. Maybe that's why forgetting evolved in the first place, to give us permission to move on. Memory is not meant to be a cage, it's meant to be a bridge. The past should guide us, not anchor us. Perhaps evolution gave us imperfect recall not as a flaw, but as a form of grace, a mercy written into the code of consciousness itself. As our machines grow wiser, perhaps they too will need to learn that mercy. A device that never forgets could remind us that some things are precious because they fade. The sound of waves that will never repeat the same way twice. The laughter that dissolves into silence, the touch that can't be stored. In the end, maybe the best kind of memory isn't the one that remembers everything, but the one that remembers enough to love and enough to let go. If we could remember everything, would we still understand anything? It's a question that sounds like philosophy but increasingly feels like science. Every day we edge closer to a world where memory can be recorded, enhanced, or even shared. A chip no bigger than a grain of rice might one day hold a lifetime. A server could become a library of someone's mind. But as the dream of perfect memory draws near, something essential trembles quietly beneath it: the wisdom of forgetting. Forgetting isn't a flaw, it's a function. The brain was designed to fade what no longer serves us. Each night during deep sleep, the hippocampus, that quiet archivist, reviews the day's events and decides what to keep. Some experiences are filed neatly into long-term storage, while others dissolve like mist. The process resembles a gardener pruning a tree, removing overgrowth so sunlight can reach the remaining branches. Without that pruning, the tree would choke itself. Our minds too need space to breathe. In rare cases where this pruning fails, the results are both extraordinary and unbearable. There are people with what scientists call highly superior autobiographical memory. They can recall nearly every day of their lives in vivid detail: what they wore, what the weather was, what they had for lunch 20 years ago. It sounds like a superpower until you hear them speak. They describe their memories as relentless, exhausting. Every mistake, every embarrassment, every grief replays in perfect clarity. One woman said, "It's like living with a film of my life that never stops running, even when I want it to." The lesson here is soft but profound. Memory without mercy becomes a prison. Our forgetfulness is not failure, it's compassion woven into biology. Evolution gave us the ability to let go because the mind, unlike a machine, must heal to continue. Each time we sleep, each time we sigh and release a memory's hold, we reaffirm this ancient contract between remembering and peace. Now imagine a future where no one forgets. Every interaction recorded by cameras, every conversation archived, every decision preserved in perfect recall. The digital age already hints at this. Old messages resurfacing, photographs reappearing uninvited. A memory that never fades means a wound that never closes. In such a world, forgiveness might struggle to survive, because there would be no distance between now and then, no gentle blur to soften judgment. Philosophers have warned about this for decades. They call it the tyranny of total recall. To remember everything is to lose perspective. Context fades when all details are given equal weight. Our brains naturally prioritize emotion and meaning over accuracy, and in doing so, they create stories that help us live. Machines, however, know no hierarchy. They store tragedy and joy side by side with identical precision. They cannot tell which memories are sacred and which are noise. In ethical terms, this raises questions that once belonged only to poets. If you could relive your happiest day endlessly, would you ever leave it? If you could erase your worst day entirely, would you still be the same person? Memory shapes morality, because it gives experience consequence. The mistakes we remember teach us. but only because they fade enough for reflection to take their place. If every error stayed as vivid as the moment it happened, wisdom would be drowned by shame. Science fiction has long imagined such futures, stories of people who erase pain at the cost of empathy, or who relive love until they lose it completely. But these tales aren't warnings about technology alone. They're reminders about balance. What makes memory precious is its impermanence. Like a candle, it illuminates for a time, then fades so others can be lit. To trap every flame in glass would extinguish the warmth that makes it human. There's also the question of privacy. If memory can be stored or shared, who owns it? In the same way your DNA carries your ancestry, your memories carry your identity. They are not just data, they are meaning. Uploading them to a machine might preserve them, but it might also strip them of their soul. A digital copy could replay the facts of your life, but never the feeling. The laughter would echo, but without breath. The love would appear, but without heartbeat. In this way, the ethics of perfect memory become the ethics of being human. We must ask not only what technology can do, but what we should allow it to change. Perhaps the goal is not to build minds that never forget, but to create tools that help us remember wisely, memories curated by compassion rather than precision. In the natural brain, compassion arises partly because memory fades. When you forget the fine details of an argument, it's easier to remember the person instead of the words. When the edges of grief blur, you can recall love without drowning in it. This soft blur is not ignorance, it's perspective. It allows meaning to outlive pain. Machines will need to learn this too if they are ever to understand us. That understanding doesn't come from holding everything, but from knowing what to let go of. You can see this truth mirrored in art. A painter doesn't capture every leaf on a tree. They suggest the forest through light and shadow. The omission is part of the beauty. Memory works the same way. It paints impressions, not photographs. If it tried to include every detail, it would cease to be art and become clutter. Perhaps the most ethical way to remember, human or artificial, is to honour this imperfection, to accept that what fades does so for a reason. Maybe time itself built forgetting into our story as a kindness. The universe remembers through fossils, through light from distant stars, through the slow archive of geological layers. But consciousness was given something different, the ability to let moments die gracefully. We don't need to preserve every second because life is not meant to be frozen. Its value comes from movement, from transformation. So as we stand on the edge of an age where memories might outlive their makers, perhaps we should pause. Perfection sounds appealing, but it may rob us of what makes memory tender, its fragility. To remember everything is not to understand it. Knowledge without softness becomes a cage, and the door to that cage is locked not by ignorance, but by excess. Perhaps time's greatest kindness lies in its blur, the gentle fade that allows us to look back with love instead of pain. In that blur, forgiveness grows, wisdom settles, and life keeps its rhythm. A perfect memory might preserve the image, but an imperfect one preserves the soul. If an individual can rewrite memory, then perhaps a civilization can too. Nations, like people, remember and forget. They retell their stories, soften some edges, highlight others. What we call history is not a single truth etched in stone, but a living record, breathing and changing as we do. Each generation adds its brushstroke, repainting the mural of the past to match its own reflection. Just as neurons reconnect when we recall a memory, societies reconnect with their shared moments when they retell them, sometimes healing, sometimes distorting, always reshaping the fabric of who they believe themselves to be. Collective memory is the mind of humanity, vast and imperfect. It is built from myths, monuments, songs and anniversaries, our shared way of saying, this is what mattered. But like the memories of an individual, it is selective. We build memorials to what we are ready to face, and we erase what still feels unbearable. Your city may keep its old walls standing as reminders, or it may pave them over and build glass towers instead. The decision is rarely neutral. Every act of remembrance carries an act of forgetting hidden within it. You can see this in the way nations tell their origin stories. The heroes are celebrated, the mistakes are whispered. Centuries later, historians return like careful therapists, unearthing what was buried, trying to make sense of the collective mind. It's an act of reconsolidation on a grand scale. When a society faces its past, not with anger, but with honesty, it reopens the neural pathways of its identity. The old story becomes flexible again. Through conversation, education, and art, the memory can soften, integrate, and heal. Consider how Germany rebuilt itself after the Second World War. Instead of erasing the wounds, it turned remembrance into a civic duty. Stones marked with names line the streets, museums preserve evidence, and schools teach the darkness alongside the light. This doesn't erase guilt. It transforms it into responsibility, the collective version of what an individual feels when they accept their own past. Healing at that scale takes courage, but it shows that even the largest memories can change their meaning without losing their truth. Other times, societies struggle to face their reflection. When trauma runs deep, wars, colonization, injustices, memory becomes divided. Different groups remember different stories. One narrative praises victory, another mourns the cost. The result is a kind of social dissonance, an echo of the psychological conflict inside a single mind. Healing comes when dialogue begins, when the stories overlap long enough to see each other's pain. It's fragile work, like stitching torn fabric by hand. Every thread requires patience, empathy, and the willingness to listen without interruption. Art often leads this repair. A film, a novel, a song can reach places that politics cannot. Art is the hippocampus of humanity, storing emotion as well as fact. When a film revisits a historical wound, a war, an exodus, a revolution, it acts like therapy for the collective mind. It allows people to see their history anew, not through statistics but through empathy. Art transforms data into experience, inviting a shared emotional reconsolidation. In this way, culture does for nations what reflection does for the self. It lets the story be retold and therefore reborn. There is a gentle paradox here. Remembering together keeps us united, but it can also divide. Shared memory forms identity, the stories we tell about us, but every us implies a them. The same process that binds a family or a country can also draw borders around belonging. Yet those borders too can change. Just as an individual can expand their sense of self to include what they once rejected, societies can widen their circle of compassion. History shows this again and again. Yesterday's stranger becomes today's neighbour when memory grows kinder. Even silence has a role in collective memory. Sometimes the act of not speaking is itself a form of remembrance. After tragedy, words can feel too small, too brittle. Communities hold vigils, light candles, or observe moments of stillness. Those pauses are a kind of social breathing, a reminder that healing is not just telling, but listening. The space between words allows emotion to settle, just as the mind pauses between breaths when integrating a personal memory. The silence is not absence, it's grace. In a digital age, the way we remember together is changing again. Our monuments have become pixels, social networks resurrect anniversaries, news archives replay the same footage year after year. Collective memory now travels at the speed of light. A story once confined to a village can circle the planet in seconds. This has given humanity a new kind of nervous system, sensitive, reactive, global. It's beautiful in its reach, but overwhelming in its detail. We are learning, as the brain did millions of years ago, how to balance what to hold and what to release. The danger is that, in trying to remember everything, we lose the rhythm of meaning. When every event is recorded, nothing feels sacred. The philosopher once wrote that forgetting is essential for creation. Without it, the world would drown in its own recollections. So even at the level of civilization, we must cultivate selective compassion, remembering what helps us grow, letting fade what keeps us afraid. The internet never forgets, but people must learn to forgive, even in the face of endless archives. Think of humanity as one great organism, its history, the nervous system, its culture, the mind. Wars are like traumas, ruptures that leave scars in collective tissue. Each generation, through art, dialogue, and time, applies the salve of understanding. Slowly the scar softens, not erased, but integrated. Our monuments are neurons, our museums the synapses between ages. And just like the brain, our species relies on reconsolidation to survive, the constant rewriting of who we think we are. Perhaps that's what progress really means, not just moving forward, but remembering differently. A society that can look back without hatred has mastered the same art as a person who forgives. The two scales mirror each other, microcosm and macrocosm, neuron and nation. The healing of one supports the healing of the other. The story of humanity, then, is a long act of remembering who we are and forgiving what we've been. Every era adds its verse, each generation its correction. We stumble, we learn, we soften. Our collective memory, like a vast living mind, continues to rewrite itself toward a little more compassion, a little more wisdom. And if you listen closely, beneath the noise of history, you can almost hear it. The faint hum of memory knitting itself back together. The quiet heartbeat of a species still learning how to tell its story with kindness. All stories, even the ones about time, must come home eventually, and so we return to you, to the traveller who never really left. You've walked through the illusions of seconds and centuries, watched the mind's clocks turn and melt, and seen how memories breathe and rewrite themselves. But beneath all that movement, something has remained still. Awareness itself. The you that notices, that remembers remembering, that sits quietly inside each version of your life. That presence has been here since your very first breath, and it will be here at your last. It is the timeless traveller within. From the beginning, this journey wasn't about moving backward or forward. It was about seeing how time moves through you, how every heartbeat, every thought, every act of recalling is the universe folding itself into a story and then unfolding again. The clock on the wall marks its circles, the earth spins beneath it, and yet your real sense of time arises not from those movements, but from the rhythm of attention. What you notice becomes the moment. What you release becomes the past. Imagine for a moment that all the memories of your life are light scattered across a vast plain. Some glow brightly, some have dimmed to embers, and some are hidden, waiting for the touch of remembrance to make them shine again. You might think of them as separate. Childhood there, yesterday here, but if you could rise above them, you'd see they form a single constellation. Every star connected, every experience part of a pattern, only visible when seen from stillness. That stillness is you. The awareness that sees the pattern isn't bound by any one star. It simply illuminates them all. The philosopher once said that life can only be understood backward, but it must be lived forward. Memory is what allows that paradox to exist. It lets you step outside the present long enough to make sense of it. When you recall, you travel, not through space, but through meaning. You connect moments that were never side by side, and by doing so, you create continuity. The self is that continuity, the mind's story. But the awareness watching it, the traveller, remains beyond the story, gently holding it all. In every culture, there are words for this traveller. Some call it the soul, some consciousness, some simply I. Neuroscience can trace the sparks of thought, the patterns of firing neurons, the chemistry of emotion, but the silent witness of it all eludes measurement. Awareness has no coordinates, no boundary, no duration. It isn't born or aged by the stories it observes. You might say it's the stage on which time performs, or maybe it's the audience sitting in the dark, feeling everything, yet untouched by the play. If you've ever watched yourself in a mirror and felt for just a second like both the observer and the observed, you've met this traveller. It's the same one who speaks quietly in your mind, who watches dreams without judgment, who sometimes surprises you with kindness toward your own imperfections. That presence is older than memory. It is the space in which memories appear and dissolve. When you practice awareness, through meditation, prayer, or simply pausing to breathe, you catch glimpses of this timeless state. Seconds stretch, the mind's chatter fades, and what's left is a clear, gentle awareness, watching without effort. In those moments, you can feel what physicists and mystics have tried to describe in different languages, that time is not a line, but a field, and consciousness is what gives it meaning. The equations of the universe describe how matter and energy interact, how gravity bends the fabric of space-time, but the experience of being is what gives that fabric its texture. Without an observer, time would be a silent geometry. With awareness, it becomes a story, delicate, luminous, endlessly unfolding. And you are both the story and the witness, the traveller and the map. Every time you remember, you move within that field. Every time you forgive, you change its shape. Each heartbeat writes a new rhythm into the universe. In this way, your life is not a sequence of isolated moments, but a continuous act of creation. Memory feeding awareness, awareness shaping the future. You're not separate from time. You're how time feels itself alive. Look back on your life as though it were a film gently slowing toward its credits. The clock you built to comfort yourself still ticks in the corner, but now you see it differently. Each tick is not a loss, but a gift. A small reminder that you have been conscious through it all. You felt joy and fear, laughter and silence, love and grief. And yet, through all of it, something in you remained constant. That constancy is the miracle. The brain may change, cells may replace themselves, memories may fade, but awareness never flickers. It observes the changes like waves passing over a shore that never moves. This awareness is what allows you to meet your past without fear. When you return to old memories now, you do so from this still place. You can see how the painful ones softened into wisdom, how the joyful ones became warmth rather than longing. You can see that every version of you, the child, the dreamer, the struggler, the forgiver, has been walking in the same direction toward a deeper understanding of what it means to be alive. And you, the timeless traveller, have been there for each step, quietly witnessing your own evolution. In that light, time travel loses its mystery. It was never about breaking physics or building machines. It was about noticing that the ability to travel already exists inside you. You move through memory, through awareness, through compassion. You revisit, you reframe, you release. The past becomes present, and the present becomes vast enough to hold all of it. So here, at the end of this journey, perhaps there is no end at all, only a widening. The lines between yesterday and tomorrow blur, and what remains is this moment, you listening, breathing, existing in the gentle pulse of now. Every sound, every heartbeat, every word spoken into your ear exists in the same eternal instant. The traveller rests, not because the voyage is finished, but because it was never about distance. It was about depth. Before you drift into sleep, take one slow breath. Feel the air fill your chest, the quiet rhythm that has carried you through every chapter. As you exhale, imagine the whole story of your life breathing with you. Every memory, every dream, every version of yourself softening into stillness. The universe continues outside your window, the stars moving in their long, silent orbits. But inside, there is peace. Time for once stands still, and maybe that's what it was all leading to. This moment of understanding that you're not inside time. Time is inside you. Every moment you recall becomes new, and so in every breath you travel again, not away from the present but deeper into it. The journey never truly ends because it never truly began. It was always here, waiting for you, in the quiet awareness that whispers through everything. You are, you were, you will be, all at once, all now.